that you have. Good morning to everyone. We're so happy that you decided to join us today. And as I like to say, today is a good day to have a good day. And so I hope that everyone is having a good day to this point, and I hope it continues. Today we are about to present a webinar from Family Separate Families Region 7. And the topic of today's webinar is the 411 on evaluations, reevaluations, and evaluation waivers. This webinar is going to be presented by the one and only Dr. Laureen Mayfield, Mayfield Education Consultant LLC. But I'm going to give you a little bit about her on this bio that's about to come up, and then I'm going to say some personal things about her. Dr. Mayfield received a BA in English from the University of Notre Dame, a master's in special education from the University of Southern Mississippi, and a doctoral degree in curriculum and instruction from Louisiana Tech University. She has taught undergraduate and graduate courses and has 35 years of special education experience. She has taught students from kindergarten to the age of 18 in both public schools and three different residential institutions in Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas. Dr. Mayfield served as Director of Special Education in Bienville Parish for 16 and a half years. During that time, she served as President of LASEA, Louisiana Association of Special Education Administrators for 8 years and was appointed by Governor Edwards to the Governor's Advisory Council on Disability Affairs, acronyms GACDA, where she chaired the Education Committee. Dr. Mayfield originated the idea for and wrote the draft legislation that became Act 833 of 2014. She also convinced advocates to support a bill that would prohibit the corporal punishment of students with disabilities against strong pushback from SPLC and other groups who have failed to prohibit it for all students, and that legislation passed in 2017. Since her retirement in 2020, Dr. Mayfield has served as an advocate for special education and Section 504 students in both Louisiana and Texas. She's currently serving as a consultant to Ascension Parish School Board, where she will be providing professional development, conducting program review, and providing guidance on strategies for improvement. But I would like to say something a little personal. I met Dr. Mayfield in 2015 when I started working for Family Separate Families Region 7 as an education specialist and an advocate for individuals with disabilities. And at that very moment, I found out that she had a heart and a passion for individuals with disabilities, for the education system as a whole. And the one thing that I most admire about her is that she doesn't mind getting out into the fields, get into the bayous or whatever. If I called her and a parent said that they had an issue with something, Dr. Mayfield didn't send her staff. She went herself. And I respect her for that until this day and admire her for being such I say an interpersonal person that you can relate to, that you can talk to. And with that being said, I appreciate her coming on today, doing this webinar for us, since I also do the training workshops, a lot of them anyway. We would like to say to her, it's your time to shine. So I turn it over to Dr. Mayfield.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Esther. I really, really appreciate that very generous introduction. And I hope I can inform your audience today and clear up some of the misconceptions swirling in the state of Louisiana right now about triennial reevaluations. I think in a lot of our districts, unfortunately, if not most of them, parents are given the impression that a reevaluation data review is a true reevaluation, especially a triennial reevaluation that they are given the right to under our federal and state law. And
Dr. Mayfield.
Yes.
Can I interrupt for just 1 minute?
Yes.
I have to make one announcement. To the audience, she will take questions if that question pertained to what she's talking about at that particular time. She will take questions. So as you raise your hand or put something in the chat box, we have our director, Chanel Jackson, and who is monitoring our chat box, our amazing director. I love my director. And she will notify us if you are ready to ask a question at that time, at that particular subject matter that she's speaking on. Otherwise, we will take Q&A at the end of the webinar. Thank you, Dr. Mayfield. I forgot to say that.
Oh, good. Wonderful. Exactly. And please do, y'all. I think it helps everyone. It informs the discussion to go ahead and ask a question if you have it. I appreciate those. It always makes me think of things that I forgot to talk about. So back to what I was saying, I think there's confusion around your right as a parent to have a true triennial reevaluation done for your child at least every 3 years. And as I'll describe, you also have a right to have one every year if you put that request in writing to your district. But the current practice in many districts of doing what they are calling a reevaluation data review year after year after year, I believe is harming children. And it's making it very difficult, if not impossible, to write a good IEP for the children. So I want to start with federal law. I really encourage all of you, parents and advocates, employees of families, helping families, other advocates that are listening to this, to always go back to the federal regulations, because the federal regulations trump everything. And sometimes there are errors. I have pointed out errors in our Louisiana bulletins to LDOE. So you always want to go back to your federal regulations. The state and the district can always give children more benefit, but they cannot take away any of the benefits that are provided through federal law. So this section of IDEA is talking about reevaluations. And it starts by saying a public agency, which is your school district, must ensure that a reevaluation of each child with a disability is conducted in accordance with these different parts of the regulations under these two circumstances. If the public agency decides that the educational or related service needs, including, and this is important, improved academic achievement and functional performance of the child warrant a reevaluation, or if the child's parent or teacher requests a reevaluation. You always have that right as a parent to request a reevaluation. The law goes on to say it may not occur more than once a year unless the parent and the public agency agree. So a district could agree with you. You could ask for 2 in 1 year, and they could choose to agree, but they don't have to. They can say, no, sorry, you are limited to 1 per year. The next part of the law, number B2, says it must occur, at least once every 3 years, unless the parent and the public agency agree that a reevaluation is unnecessary. And so if you agree and the district agrees it's not needed, what you are basically doing is signing a waiver that you are waiving that right to a reevaluation. But what does it mean when it says that we need to look at improved academic achievement and functional performance? What is improving as he should, your child should? What does that mean? So I've seen districts over and over again say that children are not making their IEP goals, but no need for reevaluation. That is wrong. Or kids are failing regular ed classes that they're going into, but no reeval needed. That is wrong. Or the child is receiving behavioral write-ups, or the parent gets calls just suggesting that you come pick them up, but no reevaluation is needed. That is wrong. So I wanted to talk for a minute about when you should be concerned that you need a reevaluation for your child. And I encourage all parents and advocates to request that the district graph student data for every goal area. So let's just pretend that this is a child who's just learning how to read. And for example, the child might be in the Edmark reading program. The first level teaches 150 sight words. So that X that says benchmark, where you want your child to be in one IEP year, might be to achieve all 150 sight words, to understand, to be able to read them and comprehend what they mean. The first dot that you see on the left of the screen that was taken in May 1st of 2025 is where your child is right now. Let's say right now that represents only 10 words. Your child can only read 10 words right now. That red aim line shows that your child has to grow from 5 words now, May 1st, 2025, to 150 words on May 1 of 2026. Let's say this is something else like math. If your child is in inclusion in the regular classroom, your child has a normal IQ, but maybe has a learning disability, ADHD, high functioning autism, emotionally disturbed, but they are normal cognitively, that benchmark is going to be grade level. It means passing the grade level test. If your child has a more significant disability and is in a self-contained classroom, it might not be grade level, right? Your child might already be 3 grade levels below. So is it realistic to form a benchmark that in 1 year we're going to grow 3 grade levels? Maybe not, right? So that benchmark is whatever you and the team decide, this is where we want the child to be. And so we draw that in one IEP year. So we draw that aim line, that red aim line, from where we are to where we want to be. Then your teachers should be checking the child. So in this example of those 150 sight words, periodically, they're going to record how many words the child has achieved. And those are the next dots that you see in black. Well, when you get over to about the 4th dot, you see that the child is flatlining, really not improving much. And more significantly, they're getting farther and farther away from that red aim line. So about the time the teacher charts that 4th data point, for sure, the 5th one, the team needs to reconvene. You need to have another IEP meeting to see what is wrong. And you might even at that time decide that your child actually needs a full reeval to help decide and inform the team what is keeping the child from making adequate progress. What I don't want you to accept is that minimal progress is acceptable progress. When I first became a director, I saw a situation where a diagnostician said that a child learning 5 words in a year was adequate progress. Well, it's not, right? So it's very important that you insist that your IEP team chart your child's progress so that you can see, are they making adequate progress to get to that goal at the end of the IEP year? I want to go back for 1 second to this previous slide and then just stress again that you always have the right to request a reevaluation once a year, and that you have a right to a full reevaluation once every 3 years. What if the district says, no, we don't think it's needed? Then they must provide to you in writing a notice of refused action with all the data supporting their decision. And if you still disagree, then you can use your due process rights to file a state complaint or ask for a due process hearing. IDEA goes on to talk about additional requirements for every evaluation and reevaluation. Every evaluation or reevaluation is going to start with a review of existing data. This is what Louisiana is calling a reevaluation data review. But every evaluation starts with that. The IEP team must review the existing data that's already been taken, evaluations and information provided by the parents of the child, current classroom-based local or state assessments, and observations. Your consent is not needed to do that. They are not pulling your child out at that point and giving any assessments. They always have the right to go and observe your child or any child in a classroom. So they are only looking at the existing data. Then on the basis of that review and input from you, the pupil appraisal team is supposed to identify what additional data, if any, are needed to determine these things. Whether the child is a child with a disability. Yes, that is true, right? That is one of the reasons we do a reevaluation. But sadly, some districts are telling parents that's the only reason. And if they want to dissuade you from requesting one, sadly, some districts tell parents, well, we can do that, Mom, but we might decide your child doesn't need special ed anymore. Well, hey, great. If your child doesn't need special ed anymore, wonderful. That's our ultimate goal, is to get every child out of special ed. But if your child is having difficulty, they're not meeting their goals, they're not passing the state tests, believe me, they are not going to be able to kick your child out of special ed. The second says, in the case of a reevaluation, if your child continues to have that disability. But look at the second part, and the educational needs of the child. They need to be looking at the present levels of academic achievement and related development of the child. And at the very bottom, which my screen that's not letting me see, go back. Okay, I'm having a little technical issue here. Everything is popped up on the bottom and I can't see the bottom of my screen. Give me 1 second. Okay, one of the most important things is at the very bottom, whether any additional additions or modifications to the special education and related services are needed to enable the child to meet the measurable annual goals set out in the IEP of the child and to participate as appropriate in the general education curriculum. That is the most important part of every reeval, to find out if your child is not making adequate progress, what needs to change? Your child's not meeting his goals. Your child's not passing his tests. What do we need to change in that child's program? The law then goes on to talk about, I don't know how to get rid of this bottom thing. I'm sorry. Nope. Ladies, do you know how to get rid of that bar at the bottom of my screen? There you go. Thank you. I apologize for that. Okay. So the law then goes on to talk about the sources of data. In any true reevaluation, they have to administer assessments or standardized tests and other evaluation measures needed to produce the data identified under this another paragraph of the law. Only if the team, including you, decide that they don't need any additional data to determine both if your child continues to be a child with a disability and, more importantly, their educational needs, they must notify you of that. That is asking you to sign a waiver. They need to tell you the reasons that they are saying a real reeval is not needed. And I think this fails to be done. They have to tell you, you still have the right to override that and request an assessment, a true reevaluation with educational testing. The agency can only do what they are calling that reevaluation data review if you agree that a true reevaluation is not needed. And I want to take a second here to goodness, that bar is on the bottom of my screen again, ladies. Can you get rid of it?
No, we can't get rid of it. We can't see the bar. You may need to reposition the mouse.
It just keeps popping up and it's blocking my slide and I can't get rid of it. It's the one that says mute start video, your screen sharing.
Just reposition your mouse and it should go away.
Okay, I got it to the top. Thank you. I need tech support. Okay, so I made this chart because I hope this will show you more clearly what I'm talking about. Every 3 years, if your child has an IEP, you have the right to a true reevaluation. The first step in any reevaluation is a reevaluation, what they're calling a reevaluation data review. The law just calls it a data review, right? And there is the citation to IDEA. When all that data that they don't need your permission for is gathered, then that team and you are supposed to say, hey, is everything going great for this child? And I will talk about what does that mean? Is everything going great in a minute? If you all agree, yes, everything's going great. My child's meeting all his goals. He's passing his tests in class. He's passing state tests. I never get any calls about bad behavior. Great. You can agree to waive the reevaluation. And the state says that reevaluation data review with no new testing would count as your triennial reevaluation date. And then in 3 years, they ask the same questions again. But if everything is not going great, do you stop there at the data review? Absolutely not. That is when you need to conduct a reeval. I want you to understand how I think all this confusion came about, and I blame LDOE for it. Perhaps it came about because there's a shortage of pupil appraisal staff, and it was very difficult for pupil appraisal personnel to conduct all these reevaluations that are required by law. But in the past, when I was a SPED director, when a child was due for reevaluation, our SIR clerks, SIR is the state database that all your child's information is put into. There were 2 options. There was a true reevaluation tab that you would put in the date and the result of the reevaluation. And then there was also a tab for the waiver. If you and the district decided no need for additional testing, you waived your right to a true reeval. Several years ago, LDOE changed that. Now, the districts think there's no such thing as a waiver, that they can do a reeval with testing, or they can do this reevaluation data review. But I am telling you that under the law, reevaluation data reviews, if they stop at that point without additional testing, is a waiver, no matter what it is called.
Okay, Dr. Mayfield,
Yes.
we do have a question in the chat.
Okay.
It says, if a child is approved for 120 hours, but the school he or she is attending doesn't have the proper staff to accommodate the child for their approved hours, what can a parent do to help the child get the hours they were approved for?
Sadly, I think that's going to take filing a state complaint, because when you sign an IEP, if the district has said they will provide a certain number of hours or minutes of service, and they are failing to do that, that is a denial of FAPE. And through all the years that I went to many special ed law conferences with the Hammonds and Seals, who represent most of the districts, and then also national attorneys from all over the country, they said over and over that judges don't care that a district doesn't have the money or doesn't have the staff. It's like, well, sorry about that, but that IEP is a legally binding contract. Anything the district puts in it and signs off on, they must provide. So I would encourage you to go on the LDOE website and file. It's not difficult. There's a form, and actually file a state complaint and say the district is failing to provide what is in the IEP, so my child is being denied FAPE. Okay, I want to show you some information from the Texas Education Agency. They have some really good information on their website that I think is more clear than things that we get in Louisiana. Just to kind of stress again what I said. And Texas says, when must a reevaluation be conducted? Every 3 years, unless the parent and the LEA, which is your school district, agree that it's unnecessary. And again, they say you can request them once a year. And they tell you when the LEA must ensure that reevaluation is conducted. When they determine that a student's educational or related service needs, including improved academic achievement and functional performance, warrant it. And I love the way that Texas puts that first. It is not primarily what you see four more bullets down. They call the IEP committee in Texas the ARD committee, that the IEP committee is determining whether they continue to be a student with a disability. That is not the most important reason that we do a reeval. And you see that if the IEP committee suspects an additional disability, let's say your child started off just getting speech services as a kindergartner, but then when your baby gets into first grade, you start having some problems with reading. Your IEP team handles that. Your child never goes back, should never go back to the SBLC. Once they are in special ed for any disability category, the IEP team is the body that must meet their needs. So you can reconvene the IEP, and the team may say, hey, mom, we would like to pull your child into resource 30 minutes twice a week for some help with reading. Are you okay with that? And if you agree, the team can do that. It doesn't matter what the disability label is. the IEP team must meet the child's needs. And if they suspect that perhaps a learning disability might now be your child's primary disability, they can go ahead and start a reeval, but they can still provide your child the additional help while they are conducting the reeval. Who conducts a reeval? They point out that when you do ask for a real reevaluation, they don't have to do everything that they did in the initial. For example, if your child has an intellectual disability, they don't have to go back and do another IQ test on the child, okay? But they have to use the assessments and evaluation materials to address the areas in which your child is not progressing as he or she should. And you see they list all of the people who might be giving those assessments. Notice on the second paragraph that Texas tells parents, if the group conducting this, they call it a read, which is this review of existing data, if they determine that they can stop there, that they don't think they need additional testing to do a true full reeval, they have to notify you in writing of that determination, give you their reasons, and tell you in writing your right to still request an evaluation to determine your students' educational needs. I do want to throw in that Wayne Stewart, one of the attorneys from Hammonds and Seals, who helped me tremendously when I was a special ed director, and I learned a great deal from, in one of his sessions, I remember him saying that if you don't have current evaluation data on the academic levels of your child, it is almost impossible to write good IEP goals. So good information from Texas that you as a parent must agree to waive the full evaluation with additional testing. If you disagree with him, disagree, say no. I want a true reevaluation with whatever assessments are needed to determine why my child is not making progress in, and whatever it is, my child's not learning how to read, my child's not passing math. I get calls about my child's behavior. I want a true reeval.
Okay, we have one more question in the chat.
Yes.
And it is, what is the difference between a reevaluation and a cognitive test / screening?
Okay, so different animals. So a cognitive test means an IQ test, and that can only be given in Louisiana by a school psychologist. In Texas, they also let diagnosticians do it. So that's determining your child's IQ. Screeners are things that are given to children before they are given a true initial evaluation and that they're in special ed. So if you think back to the process when your child was first having some issues, your child probably went before the SBLC, the school building level committee, and they probably gave some screening tests, which are quick and dirty little screeners that teachers can give, that anyone can give, to try to get just a quick picture of, does this child have an issue? And then that SBLC usually looks at those screeners and what the parent says, what the teacher says, and then they often recommend that the child undergo a Bulletin 1508 IDEA full initial evaluation. A reevaluation is done anytime after your child had the initial and was found to be eligible as a child with a disability under IDEA. A reevaluation is going to give you current data. What is my child's reading level now? What is my child's math level now? What is my child's auditory comprehension level now? Does that answer your question? Okay, if not, just follow up with me and put another question, but excellent question. So on this slide, I want you to realize that regardless of this kind of deceptive language of calling an RDR, reevaluation data review, or reeval, LDOE knows that it isn't, because this slide from an LDOE presentation in 2021 said that the school system should begin the process, the reevaluation process, 90 days prior to the due date of your child's triennial reeval. Because if they complete that data review where they're just looking at the existing data or doing observations or talking to you, no permission needed, if they do that within 30 days, and they meet with you or they send you something in writing and you say, oh, no, 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 additional components are needed, I need to know my child's present functioning levels, that still leaves them 60 days to actually do the additional testing. Also, this is another slide from LDOE. They say parents should be notified prior to starting the reevaluation. Look at the second bullet. Parent consent is not required prior to collecting the information within the RDR tab. That is true. As I said, federal law says it. They can look at any existing information. They can observe your child. They can talk to you, all of that without parental consent. Now, the next part of that bullet is wrong. It says it is best practice to obtain consent prior to collecting additional components. If by additional components, they mean testing, pulling your child out of the classroom, giving a woodcock or any other academic test or any assessment, it is not best practice. It is required under federal law. But this screen proves that they know that what they're calling a reevaluation data review is not a reevaluation. It is merely a data review. It does not require your signature and your consent. Any real reevaluation with testing requires your consent. And I didn't just make that up. Let's look at their own Louisiana bulletin. This is from Bulletin 1508, the Pupil Appraisal Bulletin. Reevaluation procedures. Number 1, obtain informed parental consent. They cannot do a reevaluation without your consent. This is from Bulletin 1706. When the review of data determines that additional data are needed, the evaluation coordinator shall, that means must, ensure that all required procedures are followed. And those required procedures are here spelled out in IDEA. C1I, parental consent for reevaluations. They must obtain informed parental consent. So once again, federal law, Louisiana bulletins clearly state, in order to do a reevaluation, they must have your signed consent. Louisiana says, oh, but you don't need parental consent to do what we're calling a reevaluation data review. Well, yeah, that's right, because it's not a reevaluation, y'all. It is a data review. It is the first step in any reevaluation.
All right, Dr. Mayfield, there's one more question in the chat.
Great.
Okay, it says, how often are cognitive tests given? My child was given one at the age of 3, but his principal told me that he's in need of an updating screening.
Okay. A cognitive test is not a screener, right? That is a very formal test given by a licensed school psychologist who has been trained how to give an intelligence test. It's not a screener. So if your principal said screener, he might not be well informed. If he is saying he thinks your child's IQ test needs to be repeated, if you agree with that, you can just put that request in writing that you would like a reevaluation done and you would like an updated cognitive assessment done on your child. And you know, there's a lot of different information in the literature about IQ. To kind of summarize it, if your child is not really being taught and is not getting everything he needs to get at school, many intelligence tests, unless they give a nonverbal intelligence test, is also partially an academic achievement test. So if your child has not been taught, it is possible that a more current IQ test is going to show a lower IQ because your child is getting farther and farther behind from where they should be functioning now at their older age, if that makes sense. But if you agree with that, you have the right to ask for that at any time. But it is not a screener. It is a very regulated, like I said, the person who gives it must have certain academic qualifications to give it. They've been trained in it, and that's your district school psychologist. Okay. So yet again, because of that stupid bar, I can't see my own slide. Give me a minute here to try to, oh my goodness. Let's see if I can move it. All right. So what does IDEA say about reevaluations, which must be conducted every 3 years unless waived by the parent? So this is taken right from IDEA. And I want you to know what any reevaluation should consist of, or any evaluation really. A variety of assessment tools and strategies to gather relevant functional, developmental, and academic information, including information provided by the parent. In other words, I sadly am hearing about initial evaluations done on children where speech, even say something like articulation, was the only thing suspected by a district. And all they did was have a speech therapist give speech tests. Well, that violates IDEA. There is no such thing as a speech only eval. If a child has concerns, and the speech therapist is part of that team, but the child should also be given academic tests. And IDEA goes on to say in B, not use any single measure or assessment as a sole criteria for determining whether a child is a child with a disability or determining an appropriate educational program. So always remember, yes, your child had to meet a criteria that he is a child with a disability to get into special ed, but thereafter, the most important part of reevaluations is determining that appropriate educational program for the child. What is your child's current academic functioning? What is your child's current behavioral issues? Any sensory issues? Current data to write a good IEP. So let's talk about when a waiver is appropriate. It is sometimes. I am not saying that every child needs a full triennial reevaluation every 3 years, but I am telling you that most of them do. So this slide is not state law. It is not federal law. This is Lorene Mayfield talking to you from my knowledge, my experience of best practice. This is my advice to you, that you should not waive your right to a full reeval with new testing unless these things are true. Number one, your child is passing whatever the state says is passing state required tests like LEAP, EOC in high school, LEAP Connect if your child isn't self-contained. Also, Louisiana has the new law about DIBELS. So if your child is not passing DIBELS, that is another reason. Number two, your child is achieving all IEP goals. As I said previously, I have seen IEPs. Whenever I help parents, I ask for 3 years of IEPs so I can see a trend, and I'll see IEP goals that were not achieved year after year after year. And yet the district is saying no need for a true reeval. No, you need a reeval. If your child is passing all regular classes, great. But if they're not, you need to know why. If the child has no behavioral issues, no discipline referrals, if you are never called to just pick your child up, which by the way, is an out of school suspension, no matter what they call it, it really is. If you have no behavioral issues, great, good. You may want a waiver. If you have your teacher graph that data and it shows that your child is on that aim line to reach benchmark where you want them to be at the end of the IEP year, if that's happening, great. You may agree to a waiver. And if your child did not have a waiver, which they're calling a reevaluation data review previously, you don't want to go 6 years, 9 years, 12 years without current assessment data. And number 7, does your child need current assessment data from Medicaid or insurance or post-school programs? I am hearing that parents are being refused for Medicaid and SSI because these data reevaluation data reviews, which are waivers, have been done over and over. And Medicaid and insurance is saying, no, we will not accept that. You don't have current data for 6, 9, 12 years. So if your child needs current assessment data for their benefits, or they're about to graduate and you're trying to get them into some other post-graduation program, then you need current assessment data, which means you need to demand a real reeval. Another thing I wanted to mention, I also see cases where IEP teams removed or dismissed related services like speech, OT, and PT in an IEP without providing you, the parent, any proof that the child really doesn't need it. If they do that, if they remove a related service, they must tell you that you can request a reevaluation to determine if that removal is justified. They cannot just remove those things without current data proving your child no longer needs it. And because of advocacy, this language is about to be added into Bulletin 1508, the Pupil Appraisal Bulletin. Required reevaluations. When a student is no longer suspected of requiring a related service, included but not limited to speech or language therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, or adapted physical ed. The projected effective date for this is October 20th. It is out on notice of intent right now. So in other words, if this goes through, then as of October 20th, the IEP teams can no longer remove a related service without doing a true reevaluation that proves that your child no longer needs those services. This is really a good thing. But even now, between now and October, you still have the right to request a reeval if they are saying, nope, we're removing speech, or nope, we're removing OT. We don't think your child needs it anymore. You can request that reeval. And finally, here is something else that's out on notice of intent, that the projected date for this to go into effect, if it goes through, will be again October 20th. This information about required reevals. LEAs, which are your district, should avoid conducting consecutive reevaluation data reviews without including additional formal or informal assessments. Why? If it's a real reevaluation, why would they put that in there? Well, they know it's not. They know it's a waiver. They know it's hurting parents. Parents are having to, they're leaving school, their kids graduate, and they're finding out they have to go pay for private assessments to get current data because programs and insurance and Medicaid and all of those things demand current data. Remember, the parent has the power to refuse to agree to a waiver of a reeval that meets all the criteria spelled out in IDEA. The parent has the right to request in writing a triennial reevaluation as mandated by IDEA, which means with additional testing. If the LEA refuses, they must provide you with a written notice of refused action. And then you can file a state complaint, or you can request a due process hearing. And as I said, realize that Medicaid and SSI are refusing to accept these reevaluation data reviews, which are waivers, as proof of current disability status and functioning levels. Okay, any questions?
Right now, I don't see any questions in the chat, but there was a comment that said, notice it does not say it's a required data review.
I'm sorry, I
Dr.
don't think.
Mayfield, that was me. I was backing you up when you said the language from the bulletin is going to change, that they have to reevaluate. They don't say they have to give another data review to
Right.
remove the services. I think that's important for people to understand.
Yes, thanks. Thank you.
I don't see any questions in the chat, but I will talk about a situation that happened yesterday, and maybe you can chime in and give your professional viewpoint on this, Dr. Mayfield.
Okay.
So I had a parent that called yesterday that has a 16-year-old. And so when I asked him what her diagnosis was, he told me it was developmental delay. I told him there's no way she's 16 and she has a diagnosis of developmental delay on the
Right.
IEP. By the time she's 10 years old, it should have some type of other, category on there.
Yes.
I asked when was his last evaluation. He told me he believes her last evaluation was when she was 6 years old. And so I asked him, had he received waivers and like to waive the evaluation? He said he didn't remember signing anything. And so he continued to tell me how delayed she was as far as like her academic. And I said, yeah, because she hasn't had an evaluation since she was 6 years old. So what are they writing her IEP goals on?
Oh my
So,
gosh.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I suggested that he, again, request in writing that he wants a full reevaluation for
Yes.
his daughter and to revise the IEP to reflect her current, her current status.
Definitely, definitely. And I would just add to that, the parent should say a full reevaluation with all components described in IDEA.
Thank you for that tidbit. I would definitely pass that information on to him.
Right. And I've given everybody here my contact information. That feel free, that's a L after Mayfield, not a 1. If I can help, if you have any questions that you think of after this, just reach out, shoot me an email, and I'll do my best to try to answer it.
All right. Well, Dr. Mayfield, again, we'd like to thank you for doing this presentation for us. It's been very informative. Thank you for the participants who chimed in with those questions. And a question that's not asked is not a question that somebody else don't want to ask. They just haven't asked it. So again, thank you so much. I'm not sure if there's anyone else who has any questions or comments. Chanel,
I
has
do
anybody else?
I see a comment, and
Yeah, I
it's
see
like,
a comment.
yeah, and it's like why Dr. Mayfield is so good at this. She needs to address this.
So it says that I was told when my son was in high school that the only reason a reeval was done was to show that he still has a disability.
Yes, I wish, well, if I had $1 for every time a parent has told me that, I would be really wealthy. It's just so sad. It is so sad, and it is so not true. And parents, I would highly encourage you. I know we all have phones and you can get online and, pull up IDEA, but I'm kind of an old-timey paper person. Go to Rights Law, WRIGHTS Rights Law. They have a wonderful book called Special Education Law that has all of the federal regulations in there. And I have it highlighted, marked, tabbed. When you go into meetings and they tell you things like that, bring that book with you and open it up and show them what federal law says is the purpose of a reevaluation. Knowledge is power. It's on the Rights Law website. Here, let me type it. I think I can type it in. Let me.
Chanel typed it in for you.
Rights Law. And I think it's under $35. It seems like it was somewhere under 30, 35. Yes, special education law. It's maybe $25 or $30. It's just every parent needs to have it, sadly. And go in, and that way, if you have it tabbed and you have it marked up, you can just open it up and say that's not what federal law says. I hope that it is ignorance on the part of the school district. I hope it is not just because they are so jammed, they don't have enough staff, that they can't get all the work done. So they tell parents that. But it's just not true, y'all. It is not true.
I want to mention one other thing to what this is Jody Rollins. I'm an advocate in Ascension, but I was trained a lot by Dr. Mayfield, and she's been such a blessing to my children. I think that what Sharon said with my sons, I was told what Sharon was told in my district. And when I met Dr. Mayfield, my expectations for my son was that he would never read, because every year he wouldn't make his goals. He just never made them. And then they would say, well, we're doing our best. And then after I started to educate myself, I noticed he had never been really reevaluated. So I meet Dr. Mayfield, and another, to me, as a lay person, not an expert like she is, another purpose of the triennial is kind of a check and balance. The district should have noticed that my son was never making his IEP goals when they did their data review waiver, which is what he was given. I meet Dr. Mayfield, and she pushes in as a volunteer, and my son learned to read in 3 months. So I just want to make sure, if any parents hear this, please don't give up on your children, because people tell you that, or they just don't inform you. They should have told me. I should have been made aware that there were multiple reasons for a reevaluation. So I just wanted to add that to what Sharon had said in the chat.
Thanks, Jody. And I just want to kind of build on what Jody said. There's a very important case that came before the Supreme Court called the Endrew, E-N-D-R-E-W. You can just Google Endrew Supreme Court case. Unanimous verdict by the Supreme Court in 2017. And it really put more responsibilities on the districts to show that every child makes progress appropriate for their circumstances. In other words, if your child has a learning disability or any other disability with a normal 100 and above IQ, that means they should be passing all their classes and they should be graduating with a regular diploma, right? If you have a child with significant disabilities, they still must be making progress that makes sense for their God-given abilities, okay? They may never get on grade level, but that doesn't mean they can't learn how to read, how to do basic math computations without a calculator. If you do not have a true reevaluation that shows current functioning levels and academic levels of your child, you have less proof that your child is not making adequate progress. And sadly, what Jody's saying is true. And I have seen it across the state where children are not making progress, but everything says adequate progress, and no additional testing. So parents, don't waive those reevals. Don't settle for a data review unless all those things that I said are true, that your child is passing everything, progressing from grade to grade, passing the state tests, no behavioral concerns. Other than that, you need that current data, and you need to compare it to the previous one and really hold the district's feet to the fire if your child is not making progress that they should be given their individual circumstances. So read a little bit about that Endrew case, great Supreme Court case.
And there is another question that came up. Does every school in Caddo Parish offer inclusion classes? I was told only certain schools offer that program where the child is on a grade on a grading scale and not just placed in the classroom to observe?
Ooh, dear. Well, I don't know what Cato does, but if that statement were true, that would be a federal violation, because IDEA, federal law, says every district must provide a continuum of placements. And the law clearly says that every child must be educated in the least restrictive environment. So any setting that they have a child on needs to have that whole continuum from being in regular class all day with maybe just special ed teacher pushing in, maybe a little bit, all the way to, if it's a child that's primarily self-contained, still to have the ability to go into, have some contact with non-disabled peers, but they have to have everything in between. They can't, y'all, they cannot fit your child into a box they draw like that. They have to meet the need of your child. That's why the I in IEP means individual, not identical. And the other thing is, when you said not just placed in a classroom to observe, one of my pet peeves is when people say in districts, well, we're going to expose the child to the regular curriculum. No, 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 no. Federal law and the court cases, especially Andrew, says that child has to be progressing in the regular curriculum in that classroom. We're not just putting them in there to just observe. They have to be making progress, which means it's the job of the staff to be scaffolding down that curriculum to a place where the child can actually engage and progress in the curriculum.
All right, Miss Esther, I'm going to turn it back over to you to close us out.
Okay. All right. Again, thank you, Dr. Mayfield, for that valuable information that you shared with us on today. Again, thank you, participants, for being here, but definitely for your questions, because it's enlightening to hear other people talk about some issues that some parents probably had concerns about, but just never asked the question or never thought to ask it that way to get those answers. So thank you again. We appreciate you. We look forward to having you again in the near future. And if you need something, you can reach out to us at Families Helping Families Region 7, 318-326-4541. Look, I'm looking at another number of a parent here, and I was calling her number. I apologize for that. Um, I see someone popped up and said, "Thank you so much for the valuable information." Let me see if I can see that. It says, "Thank you so much for this webinar. I've learned so much valuable information." That's great. That's fantastic. Again, thank you. And we hope to see you soon. We will have some more webinars coming up in October. So visit our website, www.fhfregion7.com. And we will definitely be glad to have your participation. Until then, have a blessed rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.